In the golden age of Hollywood, the camera captured everything except the truth. Behind the carefully staged romances and picture-perfect marriages, some of the biggest names in entertainment were living double lives, bound by contracts that controlled not just their careers, but their very identities. The studio system had a simple rule: conform or disappear. For 15 legendary stars, survival meant hiding who they truly were, playing roles off-screen that were far more demanding than anything they performed on camera. What they sacrificed for fame would remain buried for decades, until now. Before we reveal these hidden stories, hit that subscribe button, because the truth about old Hollywood is far more fascinating than any script. Rock Hudson, the leading man who couldn't lead. His own life. Rock Hudson embodied everything Hollywood wanted in a leading man: tall, handsome, masculine, untouchable. Women across America swooned over his romantic roles opposite Doris Day, never knowing the romance was purely fictional. Behind the studio-manufactured image lived a man named Roy Fitzgerald, who understood from his first days in Hollywood that his true self was unmarketable. The studios didn't just suggest Hudson hide his sexuality, they engineered an entire false life around him. In 1955, his agent Henry Wilson arranged a marriage to Wilson's own secretary Phyllis Gates, a union designed solely to silence growing rumors. The marriage lasted 3 years, a performance that never found its rhythm off-screen. Hudson's friends knew the truth. He lived quietly with his partner Mark Christian for years, finding whatever happiness he could in private moments. But when he was diagnosed with AIDS in 1984, even that privacy crumbled. His diagnosis became front-page news, and Hudson became the face of a crisis that had been ignored for too long. He died in 1985, one of the first major celebrities lost to AIDS-related complications. In death, Hudson finally lived honestly, his legacy forever tied to both Hollywood's golden age and its darkest secrets. Montgomery Clift, the method actor who couldn't act straight. Montgomery Clift brought a new kind of vulnerability to the screen, a raw emotional honesty that revolutionized American acting. Films like A Place in the Sun and From Here to Eternity showcased an intensity that seemed to come from somewhere deep and authentic. It did. Clift was drawing from a lifetime of internal conflict, playing the role of heterosexual heartthrob while living a completely different truth. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Clift never married for appearances. He simply remained silent, letting speculation swirl without confirmation or denial. His closest relationships were with both men and women, though Hollywood preferred to focus on his friendship with Elizabeth Taylor, a bond that became one of the industry's most genuine connections. The 1956 car accident that shattered Clift's face also shattered whatever remained of his ability to maintain the Hollywood facade. Pain medication and alcohol became his escape from both physical agony and the exhaustion of pretending. His performances after the accident carried a haunted quality that audiences found mesmerizing and tragic. Clift died in 1966 at just 45 years old. Friends like Kevin McCarthy later confirmed what many had suspected, that Clift had relationships with men throughout his life, living as authentically as the times allowed, which was never quite authentic enough. Marlene Dietrich, the siren who refused to choose. Marlene Dietrich didn't hide her sexuality so much as she dared Hollywood to say something about it. The German-born actress arrived in America with a European sensibility that found the American obsession with sexual conformity almost quaint. She wore men's suits, kissed women openly at parties, and made it clear through her entire demeanor that she lived by her own rules. The studios didn't know what to do with her. Dietrich was too big a star to control, too talented to dismiss, and too self-possessed to intimidate. She had relationships with both men and women throughout her career, including rumored affairs with fellow actresses like Greta Garbo and Mercedes de Acosta, as well as numerous male co-stars. Her marriage to Rudolf Sieber lasted from 1923 until his death in 1976, though they spent most of those years living separate lives on different continents. It was an arrangement that suited them both, the appearance of respectability without its constraints. Dietrich's bisexuality was an open secret in Hollywood, discussed in whispers but never in print. She performed for Allied troops during World War II, earning a Medal of Freedom, and later became a successful concert performer. She lived until 90, outlasting the studio system that tried to define her and dying on her own terms in 1992. Cary Grant, the charmer who shared more than a house. Cary Grant's debonair charm made him one of Hollywood's most bankable leading men, but his living arrangement with fellow actor Randolph Scott raised eyebrows throughout the 1930s. The two shared a beach house for over a decade, and the domestic photographs taken of them, cooking together, lounging by the pool, looking remarkably comfortable in each other's company, suggested a relationship that went beyond roommates sharing rent. Grant married 5 times, each marriage ending in divorce, each one adding another layer to the questions about his personal life. Studio publicity departments worked overtime to position Grant as a ladies' man, but the speculation never quite disappeared. In his later years, Grant experimented with LSD therapy, seeking answers to questions about identity and happiness that had plagued him throughout his fame. He spoke openly about the therapeutic benefits, but remained characteristically vague about his personal relationships. Those close to Grant have offered conflicting accounts, some insisting he was simply a man comfortable with close male friendships, others suggesting the relationship with Scott was indeed romantic. Grant himself deflected questions with his characteristic wit, once saying that everyone wanted to be Cary Grant, including himself. He died in 1986, leaving behind an impeccable film legacy and a personal life that remained as mysterious as any Hitchcock plot he'd starred in. Greta Garbo, the woman who wanted to be left alone. Greta Garbo's famous desire for solitude wasn't just the quirk of a reclusive star, it was self-preservation. The Swedish actress captivated audiences with her enigmatic screen presence, but her personal life remained locked away from public scrutiny. She never married, dismissing questions about romance with icy disinterest that only increased fascination with her private world. Behind that carefully maintained distance, Garbo had deep emotional connections with women throughout her life. Her relationship with Mercedes de Acosta, the writer and socialite, was documented through passionate letters that left little doubt about their intimacy. Garbo also had close relationships with fellow actresses and with writer Cecil Beaton, though his affection seemed largely unreturned. The studios worked to pair her romantically with leading men like John Gilbert, but these publicized relationships served primarily as cover for the life Garbo actually lived. She walked away from Hollywood at the height of her fame in 1941, retiring at 36, when she still had decades of potential stardom ahead. Her later years were spent in New York, walking the streets in oversized sunglasses and avoiding recognition. She lived quietly until her death in 1990 at age 84, having successfully kept her private life exactly that, private until long after it mattered to anyone but historians. James Dean, the rebel whose biggest rebellion was hidden. James Dean became the icon of teenage rebellion in just 3 films, but his most significant act of defiance was one the public never saw. Dean's sexuality was fluid in an era that demanded rigid definition, and while he had relationships with women, multiple accounts from friends and associates suggest he had relationships with men as well. Dean's meteoric rise happened so quickly that the studios barely had time to construct a proper facade around him. He died at 24 in a car crash, leaving behind more questions than answers about who he really was. Unlike older stars who had decades to carefully manage their image, Dean's life ended before the machinery of Hollywood publicity could fully sanitize his story. Rogers Brackett, a radio director who mentored Dean early in his career, was reportedly also his lover. a relationship that helped launch Dean's career but remained unspoken in official biographies. William Bast, Dean's roommate and biographer, wrote carefully coded descriptions of their relationship that later readers understood as confirmation of its romantic nature. The ambiguity surrounding Dean's sexuality has become part of his legend, making him an icon for multiple generations seeking to claim him as their own. He remains frozen at 24, forever young, forever mysterious, forever the rebel who died before anyone could demand he explain himself. Barbara Stanwyck, the tough dame, with a tender secret. Barbara Stanwyck built a career playing strong, independent women who didn't need anyone. The irony was that off-screen, she was hiding one of Hollywood's worst-kept secrets. Stanwyck married twice, first to vaudeville performer Frank Fay, then to actor Robert Taylor in what many insiders understood to be a lavender marriage arranged by MGM to quash rumors about both their sexualities. The marriage to Taylor lasted from 1939 to 1951, long enough to serve its purpose, but never convincing to those who knew them. Stanwyck's true affections, according to Hollywood whispers, lay with women. She had particularly close relationships with several actresses and with her longtime companion, Helen Ferguson, her publicist who remained by her side for decades. Stanwyck's adopted son Dion later made claims about his mother's relationships, though his statements were often dismissed as the bitter words of an estranged child. Still, the pattern of her life, the masculine energy she brought to roles, her discomfort in traditional romantic scenarios, her preference for work over any semblance of conventional domesticity, suggested a woman fundamentally at odds with the feminine ideal Hollywood tried to sell. She worked until the end, winning an Emmy for The Thornbirds at 76. Stanwyck died in 1990, taking her secrets with her and leaving behind a body of work that celebrated strong women who lived on their own terms. Anthony Perkins, the boy next door. With a secret. Anthony Perkins' portrayal of Norman Bates in Psycho became so iconic that it overshadowed nearly everything else about his career, including the private struggle that defined his life. Perkins knew he was gay from adolescence, but he spent decades trying desperately not to be. Unlike some stars who quietly accepted their sexuality while hiding it publicly, Perkins genuinely wanted to change. He underwent conversion therapy multiple times, a torturous process that accomplished nothing except making him miserable. He dated women publicly, including actress Victoria Principal, always seeking the relationship that might cure him. In 1973, at 41, Perkins married photographer Barry Berenson. They had 2 sons together, and by all accounts, he loved his family. But friends like actress Mia Farrow later acknowledged that Perkins remained conflicted about his sexuality throughout his life, maintaining relationships with men even after marriage. When Perkins was diagnosed with AIDS in 1990, he kept it secret, refusing to become a public face for the disease as Rock Hudson had. He died in 1992, with Berenson releasing a statement only after his death. The tragedy deepened in 2001 when Berenson died aboard one of the planes that hit the World Trade Center on September 11th. Perkins's story represents the painful middle ground, neither fully hidden nor fully free. A life spent trying to reconcile irreconcilable expectations. Sal Mineo, the rebel who paid the price. Sal Mineo's career peaked early with his Oscar-nominated role in Rebel Without a Cause, alongside James Dean, but by the 1970s, the former teen idol was struggling to find work. Part of that struggle came from changing tastes in Hollywood, but much of it stemmed from Mineo's increasing openness about his sexuality, a honesty that cost him dearly. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Mineo began living more openly as a gay man in the late 1960s and early 1970s, even directing a controversial stage production of the homoerotic play Fortune in Men's Eyes. It was a brave choice that effectively ended his mainstream career. Hollywood wasn't ready for a former teen idol to step out of the closet. Mineo had relationships with both men and women throughout his life, but in his final years he stopped pretending. He spoke openly to friends about his boyfriends and stopped playing the Hollywood game of carefully managed appearances. On February 12, 1976, Mineo was stabbed to death in the alley behind his West Hollywood apartment. He was just 37. Initial speculation suggested the murder was related to his sexuality, but it was eventually revealed to be a random robbery gone wrong. Still, the tragedy of Mineo's death, a young man killed just as he was beginning to live honestly, became a haunting symbol of the dangers LGBTQ people faced, even in supposedly progressive Los Angeles. Raymond Burr. Perry Mason's greatest case was his own life. Raymond Burr's greatest acting achievement might not have been Perry Mason or Ironside. It might have been the elaborate fiction he constructed about his personal life. Burr told detailed stories about his 3 marriages, about wives who died young, about a son killed in a plane crash. The stories were so specific, so emotional, that few people questioned them. They were also completely fabricated. Burr was gay, and he lived quietly with his partner Robert Benavides for over 30 years. The two met in 1958 and remained together until Burr's death in 1993, but publicly they were simply business partners. Benavides was explained away as Burr's assistant or associate, never as what he actually was, the love of Burr's life. The invented tragedies served a purpose beyond mere cover. They explained why such a successful, attractive man remained unmarried. They garnered sympathy. They made Burr seem more interesting, more romantic, more worthy of the roles he played. And they worked. For decades, almost no one questioned the narrative. After Burr's death, the truth gradually emerged. There were no dead wives, no lost son. There was just a man who understood that playing Perry Mason, television's most famous lawyer, required him to present a version of himself that American audiences could accept. Even in death, Burr's greatest performance was revealed as his most fictional. Cesar Romero, the Joker who never married. Cesar Romero played the Joker on the 1960s Batman television series, but his real-life disguise was more subtle. The Latin lover persona he projected on screen stood in stark contrast to a personal life characterized by conspicuous bachelorhood. Romero never married, and when questioned about it, he claimed his career was his first love, a response that satisfied no one but stopped the questions. Hollywood insiders understood what Romero's perpetual single status really meant, but the elegant actor maintained perfect discretion throughout his career. He escorted beautiful women to industry events, was photographed at glamorous parties, and cultivated an image as a sophisticated man about town. He just never let anyone get too close to the real story. Unlike some actors who created elaborate cover stories, Romero simply offered no story at all. His personal life remained a blank space in press coverage, discussed in vague terms about his devotion to his career and his family. The strategy worked. He remained bankable and beloved throughout decades in Hollywood. Romero lived to 86, passing away in 1994 after a stroke. His obituaries noted his bachelor status as a curiosity, a footnote to a successful career. Those who knew him better understood it was the key to understanding his entire life. A man who succeeded in Hollywood by being charming enough that people stopped asking questions and disciplined enough to never answer them. Claudette Colbert. Screwball comedy's serious secret. Claudette Colbert brought sophisticated comedy to the screen, winning an Oscar for It Happened One Night, and becoming one of the highest-paid actresses of the 1930s and 1940s. Her image was refined elegance, but her personal life followed a carefully scripted pattern designed to deflect rather than reveal. Colbert married twice, but her second marriage to Dr. Joel Pressman lasted from 1935 until his death in 1968, a respectable union that provided perfect cover for her actual domestic arrangement. After Pressman's death, Colbert lived for the rest of her life with her close companion, Verna Hull, a relationship that lasted decades. Hull was always described as Colbert's friend or secretary, but those who knew them recognized the relationship as far more significant. The two lived together in Barbados and New York, with Hull caring for Colbert through her final years. When Colbert died in 1996 at 92, Hull was by her side. The lavender marriage had served its purpose, protecting Colbert's career during the studio era while allowing her to live relatively freely in private. Unlike some stars whose secrets emerged scandalously, Colbert's personal life remained largely unexamined until after her death, when film historians began recognizing the patterns that had been hiding in plain sight throughout her long career. Dirk Bogarde, the British gentleman who never confirmed British actor. Dirk Bogarde built a successful career playing complex, often morally ambiguous characters, but his most complex performance was his own life. Bogarde lived for 40 years with his manager Tony Forwood, and their relationship was one of British cinema's worst-kept secrets. Yet Bogarde never publicly acknowledged the romantic nature of their partnership. Unlike American actors bound by studio morality clauses, Bogarde had slightly more freedom in England's film industry, but social stigma remained powerful. He chose roles that allowed him to explore themes of forbidden desire, most notably in Victim, 1961, a groundbreaking film about a closeted lawyer being blackmailed for his homosexuality. Victim was revolutionary for its time, the first English-language film to use the word homosexual and to portray a gay man sympathetically. Taking the role was professionally risky, and Bogarde's willingness to do so suggested where his sympathies lay, even if he never made an explicit personal statement. After Forwood's death in 1988, Bogarde lived alone, writing memoirs that discussed his companion in coded language that everyone understood, but which maintained the official fiction of their relationship. When Bogarde died in 1999, obituaries carefully described Forwood as his lifelong friend and manager. Technically true, but missing the essential point. Bogarde had lived honestly without ever speaking the truth aloud, a very British compromise. Lizabeth Scott, film noir's mysterious femme. Fatale. Lizabeth Scott's career in film noir seemed almost too perfectly matched to her persona, mysterious, dangerous, unknowable. But in 1955, her career was nearly destroyed, not by a scandal involving a man, but by a magazine article that questioned her sexuality by calling her a tomboy and noting her preference for pants over dresses. The article in Confidential magazine didn't explicitly accuse Scott of being a lesbian. Libel laws prevented that. But the implication was clear enough. Scott sued for $2.5 million, and the case was eventually settled out of court. But the damage was done. Film offers dried up almost immediately. Hollywood's tolerance for ambiguity only extended so far. Scott had been linked romantically with various male co-stars over the years, but she never married and lived an intensely private life. After her career essentially ended in the late 1950s, she retreated from public view almost entirely, making only occasional appearances in later years. The relationship that apparently prompted the Confidential article was with another woman in the industry, though Scott never confirmed this publicly. She lived until 2015, dying at 92, having outlasted not just the studio system that destroyed her career, but most of the people who remembered the scandal. Her story represents the particular danger faced by women whose sexuality was questioned. While men might survive with careful management, women who refused to perform femininity appropriately were simply discarded. Marlon Brando, the method actor who refused all methods of definition. Marlon Brando revolutionized American acting with his raw emotional intensity and his refusal to play by Hollywood's rules. That refusal extended to his personal life, where Brando rejected any conventional definitions of sexuality. According to multiple sources, including his own writings, Brando had relationships with both men and women throughout his life. Unlike many actors who hid their same-sex relationships out of fear, Brando seemed genuinely unconcerned with categorization. He spoke openly to friends about his experiences, including relationships with other actors, but he never made a public statement about his sexuality. Not because he was ashamed, but because he found the entire conversation reductive. Richard Pryor's widow, Jennifer Lee Pryor, confirmed that Brando and Pryor had a relationship in the 1970s, and biographers have documented other male lovers throughout Brando's life. But Brando also married 3 times and had numerous relationships with women. He fathered at least 11 children with various partners. What made Brando different was his apparent comfort with contradiction. He didn't feel the need to define himself as gay or straight or bisexual. He simply lived according to his desires in any given moment. For someone of his fame to maintain that fluidity throughout his life represented a kind of freedom most actors of his generation couldn't imagine. Brando died in 2004, having spent his final years as a reclusive figure whose legendary status had long since eclipsed any scandal about his personal life. These 15 lives tell a story far larger than individual secrets. They reveal a system built on control, where studios didn't just manufacture stars, they manufactured entire false identities. Marriages were arranged like business mergers. Relationships were ended by executive order. The cost of fame was nothing less than the right to exist authentically. What's remarkable isn't that these actors hid their true selves. What's remarkable is how many of them still managed to live with dignity, finding love in the shadows and creating families that existed outside official narratives. They escorted each other to premieres while secretly living as partners. They married for appearance while maintaining decade-long relationships their own studios knew about but never acknowledged. The tragic irony is that many of these stars, Rock Hudson, Montgomery Clift, James Dean, became icons precisely because of the vulnerability they brought to their roles, a vulnerability born from living divided lives. Their performances carried the weight of truths they couldn't speak, creating art from the pain of pretending. Old Hollywood is often remembered as a golden age of glamour and sophistication. But for these 15 individuals, and countless others like them, it was something else entirely. A beautiful prison where success meant erasing yourself, where love meant living in fear, and where the price of stardom was paid in authenticity, day after exhausting day, role after role, lie after necessary lie. If these hidden stories fascinated you, subscribe for more untold histories from Hollywood's golden age. Because the truth, as always, is far more compelling than the fiction we were sold.